Good morning. Thanks all for being here this morning. Can everybody hear me okay? Great. I'm Jessica Lumen. I'm the Commissioner at the Minnesota Department of Commerce, and joining me today are Commissioner Jan Malcolm from the Minnesota Department of Health and Nate Clark, the CEO of MNsure, the state's health insurance exchange. Today we are here to announce the 2019 health insurance rates for Minnesota's individual and small group markets and provide consumers guidance on how best to shop for insurance during the annual open enrollment period that begins on November 1st. Before we get started, let me take a few moments to thank the Commerce staff who worked on this year's rate review process. 15 employees from our insurance division were involved in the review. They were led by Fred Anderson, our Acting Deputy Commissioner for Insurance, and Christy Bone, our Chief Health Actuary. I also want to thank the staff at the Minnesota Department of Health who partnered with us in this important effort. All of these people are dedicated public servants, and we appreciate their hard work on behalf of the people of the state of Minnesota. As an overview, and then we'll get into some details. First, the individual and small group markets remain stable in Minnesota. Second, on average, rates are going down in the individual market because of lower utilization rates, lower costs per service, Minnesota's reinsurance program, and a strong Minnesota economy. Every county in the state for 2019 has at least one carrier offering health insurance in both the individual and small group markets. And individuals will have access to at least 2 carriers in 83 counties and at least 14 health plans in all 87 counties. And all of the health plans that have been approved with rates today continue to provide the following consumer protections: comprehensive health coverage and no exclusions for pre-existing conditions. I'd like to offer a little background on the rate review process. As you know, the Commerce Department does not set the insurance rates. With rate review, we carefully evaluate the proposals submitted by insurance companies to ensure that they comply with actuarial standards and with state and federal laws. We look to see that the rates proposed by insurers will be adequate to pay for expected medical claims and expenses on behalf of policyholders. We also ensure that these rates are not excessive. In addition, the Minnesota Department of Health reviews the insurer's proposed plans to make sure they comply with requirements for the adequacy of healthcare provider networks. I also want to thank the health insurance companies for their participation and work during the rate review process. Today we are announcing the final approved rates for the individual insurance market and the small group insurance market. Let me turn first to the small group health insurance market. These health plans provide coverage for businesses and organizations with 2 to 50 full-time employees. Minnesota's small group health insurance market is considered to be stable in terms of insurance participation, market size, and rates. 10 companies will be offering plans in 2019. No insurer is leaving the market, and 1 insurer is entering the market. The overall size of Minnesota's small group market is growing, going from about 250,000 in 2016 to just over 300,000 by the end of 2017. About 5.5% of all Minnesotans are in the small group market. During the past few years, most small group insurers have had relatively modest rate increases. This is also the case this year. The final average rates for 2019 range in the small group market from 2.37% decrease to an 11.93% increase. Most rates will see a single-digit increase. Small group and individual rates continue to be more closely aligned. In every rating area, the small group rates and the individual rates are closer together than they were in 2018. Moving to the rates that are being approved today in the individual health insurance market. As of April this year, the individual market included about 155,000 enrollees, or about 3% of all Minnesotans. These are the people who buy their own coverage for themselves and their families. They don't get their insurance through an employer or a public program like Medicare, Medicaid, or Minnesota Care. For 2019, the rate schedules for all 5 carriers are showing rate decreases. As you can see in the poster here, the individual health insurance market decreases range from 7.4% to 27.7%. Please note that these average changes are over all plans being offered in the individual market by each carrier. The actual rate change a consumer will experience can vary from the average based on the specific plan they select, where they live, and how old they are. These rate changes do not reflect the impact of federal premium tax credits for eligible Minnesotans who purchase their coverage through MNsure. Minnesotans who get their tax credits are largely insulated from the big rate increases in 2016 and 2017 and will see less impact from these rate reductions now. The greatest positive impact will be for Minnesotans who are not eligible for tax credits and who must pay the full cost of their own premiums. These people should see significantly lower premiums available to them when they shop for their health plans during open enrollment this fall. In terms of actual premium costs, I want to provide you a few examples of what someone might pay to get the second lowest silver plan through MNsure. For example, a 40-year-old in the Twin Cities would pay $300 per month, which is $27 per month less than last year. A 40-year-old in Duluth would pay $332 per month, which is $94 less than last year. A family of 4 in the Twin Cities would pay $1,464 per month, which is $134 less than last year. And a family of 4 in Rochester would pay $2,356 per month, which is $552 less than last year. Now, as a reminder, these are examples, and they also do not include the tax credits that folks could receive through the MNsure system. The rate changes for 2019 are an indication that, with state support, the individual market has stabilized. There are a combination of several factors to attribute stabilization to. First, medical claims costs are projected to be lower in 2019. In 2018, utilization rates and costs per services were reduced, possibly because the individual market pool tends to be somewhat healthier than anticipated. Pent-up demand for health care may have been met. Access to preventative care may have made people healthier, and carriers may have achieved some cost efficiencies. Second, the state's reinsurance program that began in 2018 and continues into 2019 is estimated to have reduced rates by about 20% from what they otherwise would have been without reinsurance. Third, Minnesota's economy continues to be strong, and a stronger economy contributes to a stable insurance market. To explain a bit more about the state's reinsurance program for the individual market, this program reimburses health carriers in the individual market for 80% of high medical claims costs. Minnesota was only the second state in the nation to enact a reinsurance program with federal approval. Now there are 7 states with reinsurance for 2019, and additional states are looking to do the same. Because about 2.2% of enrollees account for about half of the total claims cost in the entire individual market, the reinsurance program allows insurance carriers to offset their high-cost claims. $271 million per year was appropriated for the reinsurance program in both 2018 and 2019. Federal funds will offset a significant portion of the reinsurance costs. These funds are based on savings from premium tax credits that the federal government would otherwise pay Minnesotans for higher rates without reinsurance. This federal funding is anticipated to be about $131 million in 2018. While Minnesota has focused on stabilizing the cost of health insurance, we're also pleased that there will be multiple plans offered in every county for consumers to choose from. In the Commerce Department Health Rate Summary Report, there are maps showing the individual market carriers that are offering plans in each county. There's also a map showing the number of plans available in each county. Again, the goal is to have as much consumer choice as possible so that consumers can choose the best option for themselves and their families. MNsure Open Enrollment offers the opportunity for Minnesotans to shop for the plan that best fits their budget and health needs. The Minnesota Departments of Commerce and Health are also ensure that all of the health plans in the individual market and the small group market include comprehensive coverage and do not exclude for pre-existing conditions. Essential health benefits are provided by all of the plans in these markets, including emergency services, hospitalization, maternity and newborn care, preventative and wellness care, and substance abuse and mental health treatment. In conclusion, today's approved health insurance rates show that the individual and small group markets have stabilized. However, based on Minnesota's experience and that of other states across the country, it is clear that state support is needed in order to create and maintain that stability, particularly in the individual market. In the past, we have had a premium discount program, and Minnesota currently has a reinsurance program in place to provide that stability. Further, while the rates have stabilized, in Minnesota, the actual cost of health insurance continues to be a barrier for many families and small businesses. Continued focus on health outcomes, cost drivers, access, and affordability are key components of continuing to have a strong insurance market in the future. Thank you. I'd now like to turn it over to Commissioner Malcolm.
Thank you, Commissioner Lumen, and good morning. Jan Malcolm from the State Department of Health. We really appreciate the opportunity to join our partners at the Department of Commerce and MNsure this morning to talk about the importance from a public health perspective of today's good news for Minnesotans. I really appreciate Commissioner Lumen's emphasis on the importance of the benefit coverage offered in Minnesota due to our strong consumer protections in the individual and small group markets. As Commissioner Lumen mentioned, one of the core responsibilities of the Health Department is to regulate certain aspects of HMOs and health plan provider networks. The health plans offered in Minnesota by MNsure on the MNsure Exchange are required to meet multiple certification standards, including the benefits coverage that we've discussed. The Health Department is also responsible for certifying provider networks, including physicians, specialists, clinics, hospitals, and other providers. Overall, in 2019, available provider networks will also remain very stable, with only minor changes in service areas. Here are the highlights. No network service areas will be reduced. 12 provider networks will be offered on MNsure for the individual market in 2019, compared to 11 networks offered with individual health plans on the exchange in 2018. Most counties will have 2 or 3 available provider networks and associated qualified health plans. Only 2 counties in our state will have only 1 available provider network. That is Lake of the Woods and Meeker County. We often talk about the challenges posed to public health by the rising cost of health care and health insurance. We know how important having access to quality health care is for people's health. It matters whether you can go to the doctor for preventive care and when you first see signs of a troubling condition. We also know that the financial burden of health care costs and health insurance matters tremendously to families' sense of well-being and financial stability. But it's true that rising costs have placed coverage out of reach for many Minnesotans, and rising costs will continue to threaten coverage in the future. In fact, analysis soon to be published by the Health Department indicates that healthcare spending is projected to nearly double again in the next decade. Key drivers of healthcare cost include our aging population and a systemic tendency in our healthcare system to focus almost all of our resources on treating people after they've already fallen ill, rather than doing more to help them stay healthy. Obviously, people need quality health care, and they need affordable insurance to get access to that care. But that's not enough on its own. Even with the most advanced healthcare capabilities in the world, we cannot simply treat our way out of these costs. And we can't prevent chronic disease without focusing on what causes them in the first place. Healthcare costs are being driven overwhelmingly by chronic conditions like diabetes. More than 1/3 of Minnesotans today have at least one chronic condition. And we know that spending is 8 times higher for someone with a chronic condition than for someone without one. So to prevent chronic disease and to manage it, once again, we need to pay attention to the quality of insurance coverage, as Commissioner Lumen so well described, which means no exclusions for pre-existing conditions and the inclusion of essential benefits like mental health and substance abuse coverage. And further, we need to use our public health tools to identify and address the root causes of illness and to move further upstream, which includes doing more to invest in the community conditions that either enable healthier choices or make them more difficult, which is why it's so important that Minnesota continue with its leading efforts through the statewide Health Improvement Partnership to work with local communities on those community conditions for prevention, for actual health improvement. We look forward to continuing to be part of these solutions to Minnesota's ongoing healthcare cost and quality challenges, and continuing our close collaboration with the Department of Commerce and with MNsure to ensure that the healthcare system and insurance markets work for everyone in Minnesota in every corner of our state. With that, I will hand it off to the MNsure CEO, Mr. Clark.
Thank you, Commissioner Malcolm and Commissioner Lumen. I am Nate Clark. Good morning, everyone. I am the CEO of MNsure. As in previous years, there's been a lot of noise around the Affordable Care Act, and there are 3 important facts Minnesotans searching for coverage should keep in mind. First, MNsure is open for business and ready to help Minnesotans enroll in comprehensive health coverage. It's important that Minnesotans' health and their finances are protected. Second, tax credits are still available to help Minnesotans save money off their monthly premiums, but you can only access those tax credits on MNsure.org. And third, we have free in-person application and enrollment assistance available from trained experts who live in your community. So MNsure is still here, we can save you money, and there is free help if you want it. A few words about saving money. MNsure is the only place where Minnesotans can take advantage of advanced premium tax credits. These credits act like instant discounts that reduce the monthly out-of-pocket costs Minnesotans pay for their health insurance. Some Minnesotans mistakenly believe the credits are only available to low-income individuals. This isn't true. This year, an individual earning up to $48,560 a year, or a family of four earning up to $100,400 a year, can qualify for help. Last year, about 2/3 of Minnesota MNsure enrollees qualified for tax credits. These tax credits can make a real difference for Minnesotans. Last year, the average tax credit was more than $7,000 per year. Many Minnesotans are often pleasantly surprised to learn that they are eligible for some kind of financial assistance, and we need to get the word out about this. Last year, half of the Minnesotans who were eligible for tax credits didn't take advantage of them, and taken together, they missed out on millions of dollars in help. So yes, the rates are important news today, but it's also important to remember that the financial assistance is available. That's a very important part of this story. Consumers should come to MNsure.org and see if they qualify. When it comes to premium costs, for the vast majority of the Minnesotans we help, the price they see in today's rate release will not be the price they ultimately pay. To get the financial help available to them, Minnesotans should fill out an application at MNsure.org starting on November 1st. These tax credits make the final price tag more affordable, and they can only be accessed by shopping through MNsure. Finally, I want to highlight the consumer assistance I mentioned earlier. While such outreach funding has been cut for other states, MNsure still has free in-person assistance in every corner of Minnesota to help people enroll. We know that enrolling in health coverage isn't always easy, and that's why we have 1,500 certified assisters. These are brokers and navigators, and they're ready to help by providing free in-person assistance. These assisters can help individuals complete an application, and they can present them with their coverage options, and they do this at no cost. Minnesotans anxious to start the enrollment process should go to our website. They can find a broker or a navigator in their community, and they should schedule an appointment starting November 1st. So remember, tax credits are available to consumers only through MNsure.org, and in-person assistance is available throughout the state for those who would like it. In closing, let me just say this. Minnesota has the 4th lowest uninsured rate in the nation, and that's not an accident. Access to affordable care coverage through MNsure has been critical to helping Minnesota achieve historically low uninsured rates. This open enrollment, MNsure will be focused on helping more Minnesotans protect themselves by shopping and comparing plans through MNsure and enrolling in comprehensive health coverage. Thank you.
So we'd be happy to take some questions if anybody has them.
It's the case that the individual market is shrinking right now. Is it the case that it's shrinking because plenty of people are saying it's just too expensive to pay the premiums and then use the coverage once you have it? And how is that good public health news? The individual market used to be $250,000 just a couple of years ago.
So again, there's a couple of factors that play into that. So as we say, the individual market is now at about 155,000 enrollees. We do hope that as the rates continue to go down and the market continues to stabilize, that people will be able to move back into that market if they have left that market. However, we're also seeing, as we indicated, an increase in the small group market, and so we're seeing people move into other markets out of the individual market.
premiums take, I mean, the decreased numbers, do they take deductibles into account and cost sharing into account, or are these just premiums exclusive?
So what you see here is a combination of all of the plans that are offered by the individual carriers. So they're going to include all of the different pricing value plans. So it's everything from catastrophic plans up to gold and plans are all built into these averages. We can get you the detailed information about what the individual plans have and the deductible values and all of those kinds of things in more detail.
But deductibles and cost sharing are factored into the average prices, or no?
So this is the average premium
Okay.
of all of the different types of plans.
So the deductibles have nothing to do with this?
Not with this, it's
Okay.
just the value of each plan is factored into this average. Yeah, thank you. Thanks for clarifying.
Characterize for us how deductibles look for 2019 on, say, a silver plan versus 2018?
We can sure get that information for you. It's super detailed for each plan. Yeah.
At the federal level, the Trump administration is promoting short-term health plans and association health plans. So are those gonna be big factors in these markets next year?
So federal actions have been somewhat mitigated in Minnesota by the premium subsidy plan that we have and the reinsurance plan reinsurance plan that we have now. We also have very strong regulations in Minnesota around both association health plans and short-term limited duration plans. And so we think in some ways that actually insulates us from some of the impact of federal regulations. That said, these rates do reflect the carriers' expectations and understanding around the 2019 impact of those changes in federal regulations.
Real quick on that note, on the short term, I thought state law would make the short-term changes irrelevant in Minnesota, but maybe that's too strong.
So we have a law in Minnesota that regulates short-term limited duration plans, and in Minnesota, we have about 6 of those plans being actively marketed and other plans that have been approved. But in Minnesota, those plans are only bridge plans that help folks for up to 6 months to move from one comprehensive plan to another comprehensive plan, and we really see people using those short-term plans, at least in Minnesota, to help them get to the next open enrollment period like we're seeing on November 1st.
But if a carrier wanted, I mean, I think the scenario nationally is that a carrier could extend that to 364 days or something like that. Could a carrier do that in Minnesota?
In Minnesota, their short-term limited duration plans are limited to 6 months.
So it's less of a issue as an alternative coverage.
We see less of an impact of that change, yes.
And real quick on association plans, is there much change in the status quo for Minnesota, or?
There is not much change in the status for Minnesota. Again, we have a strong law in Minnesota that regulates association health plans, and so we don't anticipate that there'll be significant changes in that. However, there may be opportunity for more fully insured association health plans to move into the large group market, but we haven't seen that yet.
What happens when the reinsurance program ends or runs out of money?
Sure. So the new governor and the legislature will have to determine what form of state support that the individual market has in 2020 in order to continue this stabilization. We do recognize, and the data proves out, that through the premium subsidy plan in 2017 and then the reinsurance plan for 2018 and 2019, those were very strong factors in the stability that we're seeing today.
Would you say that it's critical that lawmakers come up with a new type of stabilization plan in the next session so that the rates don't presumably go up, about 20% or whatever?
We do think it's really important that the new governor and the legislature take a really hard look at how to continue to provide the state support necessary for a stable individual market.
Would there be options other than the status quo, the conventional reinsurance that's apparently worked so well the last couple of years?
I think that there's a lot of ideas under discussion, and again, I look forward to the conversation that the next governor and the legislature have about this issue.
Commissioner Malcolm, looking more broadly at healthcare offerings in Minnesota as a whole, the legislature and governor next year will have to figure out not only whether to re-extend or somehow extend a premium subsidy or reinsurance, but also Minnesota Care. How troubling is that for you as this administration ends and a lot of questions are on the line?
Well, we're grateful that there has been heightened attention drawn to the fact that the Healthcare Access Fund, which supports not only the Minnesota Care insurance program, but many other things we do in Minnesota to support rural health care, to support provider availability, and to support prevention, are all funded by the Healthcare Access Fund, which relies on the provider tax. And it's not the Healthcare Access Fund that goes away under the sunset. It's just specifically the provider tax funding mechanism. So I think we have two distinct policy conversations that need to be had next year. One is the funding source for the Healthcare Access Fund and what that access fund should support. So absolutely, this is going to be an urgent item for the 2019 legislature, as programs will start to be impacted in 2019 by that provider tax sunset, if that stays in place.
Some Republicans in the legislature claim that Minnesota Care can be funded through federal resources, specifically solely, and the provider tax is not needed to fund Minnesota Care. What's your response to that claim?
Well, I would want to defer to my colleagues in terms of the specifics of the intricacies of the funding mechanism, and it's complicated how provider tax and federal supports interplay. But again, I would just call attention to the fact that there are things in that Healthcare Access Fund that we believe are powerfully important for keeping care affordable and keeping Minnesotans healthier, which have nothing to do with the federal reimbursement for Minnesota Care per se. That all the supports that we give to rural health care availability, helping to support provider access around Minnesota, and prevention. I can't stress enough how backwards our funding strategy is for health in Minnesota when we fail to invest upstream in prevention. And those things are funded not by the federal government, but by this state mechanism.
Is there ever a compelling argument for a young person who's healthy to not buy ACA insurance, instead buy something, a catastrophic plan that doesn't meet, essential health benefits and doesn't, qualify for an ACA plan? Is there ever an argument to be made that some people might be best to make that decision in the current environment?
I'm going to let Mr. Silver talk as well, but I think, or Mr. Nate talk. But I think the short answer is that we really encourage people to shop for the right plan for themselves. And I think that what we show here in the scope and breadth of the plans that are being offered all across the state, that it's really important that people do shop, see if they have tax credits available, and see what the right plan for themselves and their family is. So I think, the great thing about the individual market is it really is individualized. And each one of the 155,000 people that's currently participating in the market can find the right plan for themselves.
Do you have any idea of how many people might drop out because they won't have to pay a tax penalty next year if they choose not to buy the insurance?
We actually don't anticipate that there's going to be a big impact in the individual market because of the people that are currently participating in the market. We actually hope that there'll be an increase in participation because these rates are going down somewhat.
Were you surprised by the rate decrease, how much it went down? Was that a surprise to you, or was this something you expected?
Well, when we saw the proposed rates earlier in the spring, and then we were able to do the evaluation and ensure that they actually balanced with the actuarial standards as well as state and federal law, these are pretty, they are a decrease, but we were not that surprised by them because we knew that the impact of the reinsurance program was going to have some impact on that, and then we're also seeing these trends lower with the utilization and costs.
And one thing, tell me if I'm seeing this right, the decreases are bigger, it looks like, in outstate, in greater Minnesota, than in terms of dollars, they're greater, and the premiums in greater Minnesota would have been higher to begin with. Am I seeing that right, and what explains that?
I'm not sure going to be able to answer you on a specific question.
Well, like Olmsted County, like the benchmark premium.
Are you on page 11, 13 of the report?
Page 13,
Okay.
yeah. Olmsted's benchmark goes down, it's hard to read, but I think it says $113, whereas in Hennepin it goes down $27, I think. And I think, if I'm seeing it right, it looks like most of the sort of outstate counties have a greater decline. So I didn't know if you could talk about What explains that?
I don't want to speculate on each individual county, so I can certainly get you some more information on that. But what we are seeing is there is some variety and variation, and again, in which benchmark plan it is, and also the change over time.
Commissioner,
Look at it.
I want to follow up on what my colleague talked about, and specifically, I think Commissioner Malcolm said a couple of counties, Meeker and Lake of the Woods, have only one provider available. So kind of along the line of what he was asking, the counties that have fewer provider networks available, are they generally going to see less of a decrease or more of a decrease than counties where there's more market options for people? Do you have the data cut that way at all? Can you tell us anything about that?
I don't have that data cut right now, but we can certainly get it to you.
Okay.
Again, what we're really grateful for is that there is a provider in every single county in Minnesota, a carrier, excuse me, in every single county in Minnesota, and that the number of plans to choose from is at least 14, and in most counties is greater than that.
I mean, my question isn't, I don't know, Lake of the Woods or Meeker, are they going to be paying a lot more premium or see less of a decrease than other counties? But you don't have that information.
I don't have that. And we can take a look at the chart on page 13 and answer specific questions. Yeah,
Okay.
for sure.
One thing for Commissioner Malcolm, maybe on networks. So one of the big issues in the past has been for folks who live outside of Southeast, can they buy a plan in this market where Mayo Clinic is in network? And the answer has been no. Is there any change on that this year?
There's really no change in that dynamic. I would like to just emphasize that we're blessed in Minnesota with a number of high-quality providers in markets all around the state. And I appreciate the question, because it's really important that folks do pay attention to how their provider networks are structured with respect to access to specialty care. The two plans, and this is not surprising, that feature more in-network coverage for Mayo are the plans in the Southeast. Access to Mayo and other highly specialized providers in the other plans and the other products around the state would vary by type of service, and so it's just always important for enrollees to know the specifics of their network and particularly how to access really some of that tertiary and quaternary specialty care. That's something that is important for consumers to know and does vary quite a bit from plan to plan.
And aside from Mayo, are there any network, it's very detailed, but I mean, when you all look at the details, are there any pleasant surprises? People are going to find the network, oh wow, it's a lot bigger, or is it kind of the same?
I hear, too, with respect to provider availability, it's a story of the market being relatively stable and there being provider access that meets our standards for geographic access and coverage of specialty types in each of these networks. So it does remain a good news story that provider access is generally good around the state.
Commissioner or Commissioners or Mr. CEO, what could next year blow this up? I assume that if the legislature decides not to provide reinsurance, an extension of that, now we'd be talking about 2020 then, at that point, that most of these reductions would go away. Are we correct in that? What other things on the federal level or otherwise might switch us around to the other mode where we were having significant increases instead of significant decreases? Can you give us any thoughts anecdotally or otherwise on that?
I think that we have, as we've discussed, we have an opportunity moving forward in the next legislative session to really address how we continue this stabilization in the individual market. And I think that we have very sophisticated carriers in this state, and we also have very sophisticated consumers. And I think that we all continue to look at the impact of federal regulations and change at the federal level, as well as the goals we're trying to achieve of providing access to affordable health care for all Minnesotans. And those are the areas that we need to continue to focus on moving forward.
Would it be fair to say that if reinsurance isn't there, that it would have a significant impact in 2020?
We need to have a plan in place for plan year 2020. And again, I think there's a real opportunity to think about what that looks like in the next legislative session.
But without reinsurance, does it create real problems? Some of your colleagues were nodding their heads.
I think we need a plan. And I think that reinsurance has been the plan for 2018 and 2019. The premium subsidy plan was in place, program was in place for 2017. And I think we need to continue to look at what we're going to do moving forward.
You said that federal support accounted for over 100 million of the reinsurance funding. What's the future of that? I mean, is that something that that Minnesota can count on going forward, or is that, who knows?
So in order to operate the reinsurance program, the Commerce Department had to apply for a waiver from the Department of Health and Human Services, and that waiver is in place. And each year, we will need to go back to the department and talk about what our experiences have been, what our projections are, and firm up exactly what that reimbursement rate will be. Again, it's based on prior experience, and so we anticipate, because we have the approval of the 1332 waiver, that the federal approval does continue. It's just the amount of money that we will actually receive as federal subsidy may change over the years.
Just for the nuts and bolts of, a 1332 waiver for plan year 2020, when would you need authorization from the legislature in order to get everything in place for open enrollment next year?
Again, we think that this is something that really needs to be addressed in the beginning of the next legislative session around what the plan is going to be. If it's going to be a reinsurance plan, if it's going to be a premium subsidy plan, if it's going to be another plan. Again, the state support for the individual market is, as we said, a very important factor in ensuring that the stability of this market continues, as is the utilization rates and the cost reduction and the stability of our overall insurance market. So we think that there's a real opportunity for the legislature and new governor to take a look at this soon.
Part of the reinsurance bill created the ag co-ops. Do you have any information about how big of a factor they've played in the individual or the small group market?
We don't have any information on that specifically. We can certainly get you some information about that or refer you to them directly. Yeah.
Okay, thanks everyone.
Thank you all.
Thank you very much.
Let's go, guys.